At
Hey,
6:12
watch
a.m.,
snow!
my
You're
phone
getting
exploded
it
with
all
alerts as
right!
whiteout winds
Stop
screamed
that thing
outside,
right now!
but the message that mattered came from the HOA board. Reminder: unauthorized snow removal equipment is prohibited. I stared at it, stunned, while my plow sat idle in the driveway and the neighborhood disappeared beneath drifts taller than mailboxes. That warning would set off a chain of events nobody saw coming, ending with a stranded school bus, terrified parents, and an HOA begging the man they pushed away. I bought the plow to help, not to profit. Winters here are brutal, and last year an ambulance nearly didn't make it through. I cleared the streets before dawn, neighbors waving, kids cheering. Then the letters started. Complaints about noise, complaints about liability, complaints about unapproved modifications. I attended meetings, explained insurance, offered waivers. They smiled, nodded, and voted no. The ban came 2 days before the storm. A once-in-a-decade blizzard, meteorologists said, the kind that erases roads and swallows cars whole. I emailed the board, warning them. I offered to clear the bus route for free. The reply was curt: comply or face fines. Remove the plow immediately. So I did. I unbolted it in the cold, hands numb, pride colder. The storm hit overnight. By morning, the world was a blank page. Snow stacked fast, wind sculpting walls across every cul-de-sac. I stayed inside, coffee cooling, listening to the weather radio list closures like a roll call of surrender. My phone buzzed again. Not the HOA this time. Parents in a group chat panicked. The bus was stuck. It had tried the main loop and slid sideways into a drift near the hill. The driver couldn't turn, couldn't reverse. Diesel gelled. Kids were crying. The heater failed. Plows from the city were hours out. Someone suggested calling me. Another replied, he's not allowed. I watched the clock tick. I watched the snow rise. I felt something harden in my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The HOA had made their choice. I made mine. I shut off my phone, pulled on boots, and walked away from the window, unaware that within an hour, the same board would be calling, and the rules would suddenly become flexible. I knew consequences would follow, but principles matter when storms test them. Outside, sirens faded, and the wind kept howling, patient, relentless. Somewhere, a bus idled, breath fogging windows, fear thick. I hoped the kids would stay calm, that help would arrive. I also knew the lesson being taught would stick longer than any fine, longer than any meeting, longer than winter itself, because power without sense collapses fastest when buried under snow. I stood ready, silent, waiting for the call they swore they would never. The call came at 6:58 a.m., right on schedule, like the storm itself had planned it. I let it ring while I watched the snow whip sideways across my yard, swallowing the tire tracks I'd made yesterday when I still believed common sense mattered. When I finally answered, the HOA president's voice was tight, rehearsed calm cracking at the edges. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just said my name and paused, waiting for relief she hadn't earned. The bus had been sitting for nearly an hour now. Parents were arriving on foot, slipping, panicking, yelling at each other and at the driver, who was doing everything he could to keep kids calm. The road crews were overwhelmed. Emergency services were prioritizing highways. The hill where the bus was stuck had become a wind tunnel, packing snow faster than shovels could move it. They needed a plow. They needed mine. I reminded her, gently, that the equipment was banned. She said the board was reviewing the policy in light of emergent conditions. That phrase did something to me. It stripped away the last thread of goodwill. Emergencies didn't change the rule yesterday. They just changed who the rule hurt today. She asked if I could reinstall the plow and help, as a neighbor. I asked if the fines were rescinded. She said they could. Discuss that later. I told her later wouldn't warm kids right now. Silence stretched. Wind roared. Somewhere, a child cried. I hung up. Minutes later, another call. Then texts. Then a knock at my door. 2 board members, red-faced, snow-crusted, eyes darting to my driveway like the plow might magically reappear. They spoke faster now. Liability waivers, temporary permissions, verbal approvals, everything they'd dismissed before suddenly existed. I told them the truth. The plow was off, stored, and I wasn't reinstalling it while they stood there improvising authority. I'd offered solutions. They chose control. I wasn't their emergency lever. They left angry, muttering about consequences. As if consequences weren't already sitting in a frozen bus. From my window, I watched parents try to push the bus, boots slipping, shoulders straining against physics and policy. Snow buried ankles, then calves. The wind erased progress as soon as it was made. I felt sick, not triumphant, not smug, just sad that it had come to this. Another call buzzed in. This time, it wasn't the HOA. It was the bus driver. He'd gotten my number from a parent. His voice was steady, professional, exhausted. He didn't demand. He didn't threaten. He just said, "I'm running out of options." That's when I realized the storm wasn't the test. People were. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside, the cold biting like it wanted a piece of me. The wind shoved hard, forcing each breath into a fight. Halfway down the driveway, I stopped. Not because I was scared of the storm, but because I was finally clear on the line I wouldn't cross. Helping people wasn't the same as rescuing an HOA from its own rules. I called the bus driver back. I told him where the bus was stuck, the angle of the hill, the way the snow drifted there every winter. I told him how to keep the kids warm, engine cycling, seat sharing, calm voices. He thanked me. No pressure, no guilt, just professionalism. It made the contrast unbearable. Within minutes, my phone lit up again. Parents now, some angry, some desperate. One mother cried, apologizing for signing the complaint months earlier. Another father yelled that I was letting kids suffer to prove a point. I absorbed it all, standing in the wind, knowing how easy it would be to cave. Knowing how fast this would be forgotten if I did. Then the HOA sent an email blast. Subject line in bold. Temporary authorization granted. It promised no fines, full indemnification, and a formal apology to follow. The tone was frantic, stripped of power. They CC'd everyone. They wanted witnesses to my compliance. I replied with one sentence. Please confirm this policy change is permanent and approved by vote. No answer. Instead, a city truck appeared at the far end of the neighborhood, struggling, chains screaming. It made 10 feet and stopped. The driver got out, shook his head, and radioed in. Too steep, too deep. He turned around, tail lights fading into white. Time stretched. The wind didn't care. The kids were still there. That's when the bus door opened. Parents rushed in, wrapping coats around small shoulders, forming a human barrier against the cold. The driver kept count, voice calm, hands steady. No panic, just resolve. I felt something shift. Community, raw and imperfect, doing what the board couldn't. Another message came in. The HOA president again. Short this time, please. I walked back into my garage. I stared at the plow mounts, the bolts I'd removed with numb fingers days ago. I imagined reinstalling it. I imagined the applause, the relief. I also imagined the next meeting, the next rule, the next emergency where control came first and sense came last. I picked up my wrench. Then I put it down. I wasn't abandoning the kids. I was refusing to teach the wrong lesson. By 8:10 a.m., the temperature had dropped another 6 degrees, and the wind shifted just enough to bury the bus up to its wheel wells. Parents huddled inside, passing around gloves, singing songs to keep kids distracted. Someone live-streamed updates. The comments split instantly, half blaming the HOA, half blaming me. Watching strangers argue while real people froze felt surreal, like the internet was a different planet. Emergency management finally stepped in. Not with plows, but with protocol. A county supervisor called the HOA president directly and asked one question: why a capable resident with equipment had been prohibited from assisting during a declared weather emergency. There was no good answer. Just silence and legal language. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a new email. This one wasn't temporary. It was a resolution document, hastily drafted, authorizing resident-operated snow equipment during emergencies, effective immediately, retroactive protections included. It was ugly. It was rushed. But it was real. I replied once. I'll clear the road to the bus only. I didn't ask for applause. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I reinstalled the plow while the wind tried to knock me sideways, metal screaming as bolts tightened. When I rolled out, neighbors stepped back like I was driving a tank. The snow resisted, heavy and stubborn, but the blade cut through, carving a path where rules had failed. The bus came into view, Windows fogged, kids pressed close. The driver gave a thumbs up. Parents cheered, then cried. I cleared the hill, angled the blade, backed up, cleared again. It took 3 passes. The bus rocked free. As it rolled forward, something unexpected happened. The kids started clapping. Not loud, not wild, just steady, mittened applause that cut through the storm. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't follow them out. I turned back, cleared just enough for emergency access, then went home. By noon, city crews arrived and finished the rest. The crisis passed. The storm moved on. That night, the HOA sent another email. Longer, polished, full of gratitude and lessons learned. They invited me to a meeting to discuss future collaboration. I didn't go. A week later, the policy stood. In writing. No more bans. No more threats. They'd learned, the hard way, that control without competence collapses under pressure. I keep the plow mounted now. Not for them. For the next storm. For the next moment when rules meet reality. And when winter comes back howling, I won't wait for permission to do what's right, but I also won't forget how quickly power panics when it realizes it needs the people it tried to silence. The storm was over, but the aftermath lingered like ice in the cracks. For days, the neighborhood moved differently. People waved longer. Conversations lasted a little deeper. And the HOA, once loud and absolute, went strangely quiet. Meetings were postponed. Emails slowed. Authority, it turned out, doesn't recover quickly after being exposed to cold reality. I thought it was finished. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. Not an apology. Not gratitude. A notice. The board had concerns about precedent. They claimed my actions, while helpful, had encouraged unauthorized initiative. They wanted to revise the new policy with added oversight, permits, inspections, fees. Control creeping back in through paperwork. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. At the next open meeting, the room was packed. Parents from the bus incident filled the seats. The driver came too. City officials sat in the back. The board tried to sound reasonable, explaining risk, liability, order. Then they opened the floor. The first speaker was a mother who'd been on that bus. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply described holding a stranger's child to keep them warm while the wind rocked the vehicle. She asked one question. Which rule would you like me to follow next time? No one answered. Others followed. A paramedic. A city plow driver. An elderly man who'd been trapped in his house during a previous storm. Each story chipped away at the illusion that order equals safety. Sometimes, it's the opposite. When my turn came, I kept it short. I said I didn't want power. I didn't want praise. I wanted clarity. Emergencies don't wait for meetings. People act. Systems should support that, not punish it. The vote happened that night. Not unanimous, but decisive. The policy stayed. No new fees. No extra control. A rare thing happened. Authority learned. Afterward, the HOA president approached me. She looked tired. She said she'd joined the board to keep things running smoothly, not to freeze kids in a bus. She apologized. Really apologized. I accepted it, not because it erased the past, but because it changed the future. Winter returned again a month later. Smaller storm. Still nasty. Before dawn, I was out plowing. This time, no warnings. No threats. Just neighbors bringing coffee and waving from porches. I realized then that walking away that morning hadn't been abandonment. It had been leverage. Silence, used carefully, can force systems to listen when shouting never does. The bus never froze again. And the neighborhood learned something storms teach best. Rules matter, but people matter more. And when the snow falls heavy, it's character, not authority, that clears the road. Winter settled in hard after that, the kind that doesn't announce itself with drama but with persistence. Snow fell every few days, not enough to make headlines, just enough to test whether lessons stuck once the fear faded. I watched closely. So did everyone else. The first real test came on a Tuesday morning when a transformer blew during heavy snowfall, knocking out power to half the neighborhood. Streets went dark. Heat systems failed. The HOA's emergency plan, 3 pages of phone numbers and a reminder not to use candles, proved useless. What worked instead was speed. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Extension cords ran between houses. I cleared the streets without asking, and no one tried to stop me. Something had shifted. Parents from the bus incident organized a snow response group chat. Not official, no titles, just names and tools. Who had shovels? Who had generators? Who could drive in deep snow? It wasn't rebellion, it was readiness. And strangely, the HOA didn't interfere. They forwarded city alerts and stayed out of the way. That silence mattered. One afternoon, I ran into the HOA president at the mailbox. She looked at the plow and smiled, almost sheepish. She admitted the board had received fewer complaints since the storm. Fewer emails. Fewer demands. People seem calmer, she said. I told her calm comes from knowing someone will act when things go wrong. The real moment of confirmation came during another blizzard, smaller than the first but still dangerous. The school district delayed buses, then canceled entirely. But one bus, rerouted due to road closures, slid into a drift near the same hill. History tried to repeat itself. This time, there was no panic. The driver radioed it in. Parents stayed home. I got a message. Not from the HOA, but from the driver. If you're able, it read. No pressure. Just trust. I cleared the route in under 15 minutes. The bus never cooled. The kids never cried. No one live-streamed anything. Afterward, I sat in my truck and realized something important. The power struggle was over because it no longer mattered. The system had adapted, not by tightening rules, but by letting capable people be capable. A month later, the HOA updated its bylaws again. Quietly, a single sentence added. In declared emergencies, residents may act in good faith to preserve safety without prior authorization. No meeting, no applause, just sense, finally written down. I kept plowing through the season. Not as a statement, as a habit, and every time the blade pushed snow aside, I thought about how close we came to choosing pride over kids, procedure over people. Storms don't care about hierarchy. They reveal it, and when winter finally loosened its grip, what remained wasn't bitterness or victory. It was something rarer. A community that remembered the cold, and decided not to forget what it taught. By mid-January, the winter had settled into a rhythm, a mix of small snowfalls and gusting winds that reminded everyone how fragile their streets really were. The first storm had been a lesson, the second a test. By now, neighbors knew who to trust and who to wait for. The HOA, for all its talk of rules and liability, had faded into the background. They still existed, but their power had been diminished, not by force, but by experience. One morning, around 5:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new alert. The district school buses were attempting early pickups on routes deemed unsafe by city crews. One bus was already blocked halfway up Maple Hill, the infamous incline that had caused last month's chaos. The weather wasn't as severe as before, but the snow was slick, and black ice hid beneath every drift surface. The bus driver called me directly. He didn't beg, he simply said, "I need a path." I stepped outside, boots crunching over snow crusted hard by overnight wind. The neighborhood was still asleep, streetlights reflecting on icy roofs. My plow sat ready. This time, no messages from the HOA, no warnings, no threats. Just the trust that had been earned. I drove carefully, angling the blade, slicing through packed snow that had already claimed one vehicle the night before. As I cleared the path, I saw neighbors quietly shoveling sidewalks, stacking sandbags, and spreading salt. No applause, no arguments, just coordinated effort. Kids pressed faces against windows, watching a well-oiled system in motion. For the first time, the emergency response felt seamless. The bus arrived at the hill, and with the route cleared, it glided safely to the top. The driver steered expertly, radioing back a simple, calm message, "Route clear. All secure." By mid-morning, the storm had passed, and for the first time, no one was panicked, no one stranded, and no one angry. The HOA issued a brief email acknowledging the conditions, emphasizing resident initiative and cooperation. There was no fear in the tone. No implication that action had been required to follow rules. Just recognition. Quiet, understated, and effective. I reflected on the change. A month ago, this situation would have ended in chaos. Kids cold, parents frantic, boards flustered, and me shaking my head at bureaucracy. Now, With little more than coordination and experience, the neighborhood had functioned as a unit. Storms didn't scare us anymore. They revealed who could act, and who would. Driving back, I realized the real difference wasn't my plow, or even the rules. It was respect. For capability, for preparation, for community. The storm had become less of a test and more of a confirmation. The neighborhood could survive if it trusted the people willing to do the work, without waiting for permission. And in that calm, post-blizzard light, I understood. The HOA's authority could never match the momentum of prepared, empowered residents. By late January, winter's grip tightened again, though this time, the fear that had haunted the neighborhood months earlier was gone. People had learned, not through meetings or rules, but through experience, preparation, trust, and action mattered more than authority. The streets bore the scars of past storms, snow banks stacked like monuments, but there was a new rhythm. Everyone moved in anticipation rather than panic. It started with a minor storm alert. 6 inches expected, gusts up to 40 miles per hour. City plows were stretched thin, delayed by prior snowfalls. The HOA sent its usual stern email, warning residents to stay indoors and follow official channels. Most people ignored it. I was already outside, pre-treating streets and driveways, my plow ready. By 5:30 a.m., the first bus of the day called in. Ice had glazed the roads overnight, and a few families were waiting for pickup along the route. I worked quickly, clearing the worst sections first. This time, parents stepped in, helping keep kids warm while the route was cleared. Everyone knew their role, everyone knew what to expect. Coordination replaced confusion. The real test came when another bus became stuck near Elm Circle, the infamous bend where previous vehicles had spun into snowbanks. The driver's voice was calm but measured. "If you can, get us through. No panic, no blame, just a clear request." I turned the plow toward the drift and began clearing a path. The snow was heavier than expected, and gusts threatened visibility. But the neighborhood had shifted. Someone salted the road ahead, another neighbor flagged traffic, and within 15 minutes, the bus moved forward safely. When the last bus cleared, I parked the plow and walked home. No applause, no bored emails demanding recognition. Just the sound of children laughing through open windows, neighbors waving from porches, and a quiet satisfaction settling over the streets. Winter hadn't been defeated, it had simply been managed. Later that day, the HOA quietly revised its winter policies. No public meetings, no headlines, just one sentence added. Residents exercising good faith to maintain safe passage during emergencies shall be recognized and protected. It was subtle, almost invisible, but monumental. Authority had learned that it could no longer hinder practical action. Driving past the cleared streets, I realized how far we had come. A storm that would have once paralyzed the neighborhood now passed with minimal disruption. Kids still rode to school, parents still slept, and the city crews arrived later, helping rather than rescuing. The lesson was clear. When those willing to act are empowered, rules bend, chaos retreats, and people survive. And as snow continued to fall lightly on the rooftops and streets, I understood the truth. The winter storm didn't teach fear, it revealed competence, community, and the courage to do what's right, even when no one asked. The final storm of the season arrived just before February, a fierce blizzard with heavy winds and relentless snow. Most neighborhoods would panic, most boards would scramble, most people would wait, but not here, not anymore. The lessons of past storms had cemented themselves. Experience had become a shield stronger than any rule, and the neighborhood moved like a well-oiled machine. I woke before dawn, coffee in hand, surveying the streets. Snow already covered everything, layers of white masking hazards below. The plow was ready, tanks full of fuel, lights flashing. Parents and neighbors were already outside, shovels, salt, and grit in hand. No instructions needed, everyone knew what to do. It wasn't chaos, it was rhythm. By 6 a.m., the first bus called in. Ice-slicked roads had trapped a few families, making early pickups dangerous. The driver remained calm, confident that the path would be cleared. I engaged the plow, cutting a route through drifts taller than wheel wells, the engine roaring against the howl of the wind. Neighbors followed, checking sidewalks, aiding families, flagging intersections. Every movement was coordinated, each step reinforcing the lesson. action is more powerful than authority. Half an hour later, another bus reported a drift blocking the main loop near Pine Street, where cars had spun during previous storms. In years past, that would have been a panic scene, parents shouting, drivers frozen, emergency crews overwhelmed. Not today. Neighbors salted the road ahead while I cleared the drift. The bus driver carefully steered through the carved path. Kids clapped as the tires finally gripped solid ground. Relief was quiet but profound. By midday, every bus was on schedule. Streets remained passable. No children stranded. No parents panicked. The HOA sent a single email. Thank you to all residents who acted in good faith during this storm. No directives, no reprimands. Just acknowledgement. Authority had finally aligned with competence. Later, I parked the plow in the garage, snow scraped from the blade. I stood for a moment, surveying the quiet streets beneath soft snowfall. This winter, the storms had come and gone, but something more enduring remained. Trust, preparedness, and a neighborhood empowered to act when rules failed. The board may still exist. Rules may still exist, but in the end, action matters more than authority, preparation more than permission. And when the next winter storm arrives, the lesson is clear. Those willing and able will clear the path, not for recognition, not for reward, but because some things, like safety, responsibility, and common sense, cannot wait. The snow fell softly, and for the first time, I smiled, knowing that when chaos comes again, the streets will remain open, the buses will keep moving, and the people will have learned to trust action over bureaucracy.